goes behind the new book about a coast-to-coast criminal scheme that was exposed right here in a South Boston courtroom. It's called Unacceptable: Privilege, Deceit, and the Making of the College Admissions Scandal. Governor Charlie Baker announced today that around 70% of schools in the state plan to offer either full or partial in-person learning options this fall, while about 30% will go all remote. But for a few dozen districts, things are still up in the air, including Boston. All districts were required to submit reopening plans to the state by this past Friday, and so Boston did, filing an 87-page report stating, quote, "There is no one solution that will work best for every student, every family, or every person who works with Boston Public Schools. Recognizing and respecting that fact, the BPS reopening plan provides several learning model options for families to choose in order to best meet the educational needs of their children. The options they laid out are for students to go fully remote or to go to school in person 2 days a week and learn remotely the other 3 days, with half of students going in on Mondays and Tuesdays, the other half Thursdays and Fridays, and students with special needs could go to school in person every day but Wednesday if they choose. But there's a big but. According to the filing, schools will only open for the hybrid options, quote, if and when the Boston Public Health Commission determines it is safe to do so, given its constant monitoring of public health metrics. The district is also requesting a waiver to start a little later on September 21st for most students, but the filing has not been met by universal acclaim, with many raising concerns about the continued uncertainty, leaving families and teachers unable to plan. I'm joined now by Boston Mayor Marty Walsh and Superintendent of the Schools, Brenda Cassellius. Gentlemen and lady, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Jim.
First of all, let me start by saying, from my seat, this is one of the hardest decisions public officials have to make. I know that. Having said that, starting with you, Superintendent, two leaders in this community had some response to your plan. Andrea Campbell, City Councilor: "I remain shocked and disappointed. We still do not have a decision on reopening, but instead have an 80-page document with no decisive plan." President of the Boston Teachers Union, Jessica Tang, said, "Most importantly, the district needs to immediately announce it will be returning remotely first, with a phased-in return for students most in need of in-person services." Jessica Tang's remarks, as you know, were echoed by a coalition of black clergy in the city. What do you say to people who share their perspective, Superintendent?
Well, that's exactly what we've been doing, Jim, is waiting and getting perspectives and getting all of our perspectives, collecting that, being thoughtful, being thorough, and making sure we weigh this really complex and important decision for us. It's not only a decision of our children's education, it's one of safety, and it is absolutely imperative that we take the time to get it right.
You know, Mr. Mayor, what I've read is in response to the union's criticism, you said that you thought in part it was a political maneuver, but isn't a remote start both the safest and wisest route for the beginning of the school year, at least?
Well, I think we've been very clear. Our preferred option is to have in-person classrooms for our kids. By the time September 21st comes around, our children will be 6 months out of a building. And our numbers indicate right now that we are at a 2.6 infection rate this week. We dropped from 2.8 last week. So we're monitoring this information really closely. The best place for our kids is to be in a school, learning in a school. But again, I've made it very clear, and the superintendent has as well, we're not going to put our kids in harm's way. If we feel that it's dangerous, if our schools are not prepared to have in-person learning, we're going to go all remote. I'm not sure why Councilor Campbell is shocked and disappointed here. We still have 5 weeks to go before we open schools, and these decisions aren't lightly. We're seeing growing achievement gaps with our Black and Latino students. We have English language learners that English is not their first language in people's homes. So our kids have a lot of challenges. So we want to make sure that to try and present them with the opportunity to do in-person learning. And quite honestly, if we can't do that, then we're going to go all remote. And our kids have been remote for the last 6 months.
But, Mr. Mayor, since you raised the achievement gap, do you not worry that having a choice on the part of parents exacerbates the divide that you were just speaking about? Those who can afford to stay home and juggle several balls, hire help if they need it, will do it. And those who can't afford to will send their kids to school, even if they believe that their kid may not be safe. Does that not concern you?
Well, we honestly say every option that we have, there is always been an opt-out provision for parents. So the conversation that we're having right now, whether we're in school, well, if we're in school learning September 21st, parents do not have, they have the choice not to send their kids to school and remote learn. So that's been an option from the very beginning of this. Even if we did all in-person learning, at this point with COVID, we would always have an opt-out provision to allow parents to opt out.
You know, Superintendent, I operate under the assumption that there is simply a good faith disagreement about the safety issue between the teachers union and you two, for example. Let's assume it is in good faith. But as somebody who runs the school system, do you want an educator or a nurse in a school building who in good faith feels that they're not safe, even if you're convinced they are? Should they not have a choice, just like these parents do?
Well, certainly they always have a choice on whether they are in the classroom or not. We have existing policies as well as the Coronavirus Family Leave Act policies that they could take advantage of if they really do feel as though they have some underlying condition or a medical condition for them or their family in which they need to be exempt. But
well, what if they're just anxious? What if they're just scared?
Well, we're all, feeling some sort of anxiety, and I empathize with them as well. And I really understand that, this is scary. It's going to be scary for our kids. This is nothing that we've ever experienced before. But I believe that if we can guarantee and we can show them, and they can get in the buildings and see that they're clean and that we do have the proper protocols in place, I think that they'll feel more settled. And I think that we just need to get them back in to see that they're settled. And the really nice thing is that with that September 21st date, we have several weeks for them to come in and actually see for themselves that we are ready. And so I think that's a really important piece.
Mr. Mayor, what's the status of, I'm sorry, go right ahead.
Let me be clear here. From the very beginning of coronavirus, we have taken every single precaution. We were ahead of the curve in a lot of ways in our city. We shut construction down when other cities didn't do it. As the governor reopened, we delayed a lot of our reopenings a week and 2 weeks in some cases. I am certainly not going to put teachers or students in harm's way. What we're asking people to do is, and there's lots of opinions on this, and I understand that and I appreciate that. What we're asking people to do is just work with the superintendent, work with the schools to see what the schools look like as far as safety measures. We're replacing windows, we're bringing in fans, we're fixing ventilation systems. We're doing all that right now. Now, we might not be in school September 21st, and that decision will come soon. But at some point, we have to reopen schools here in America, and in Massachusetts, and in Boston. And for all intents and purposes, when we do reopen the school, coronavirus is still going to be here. It's just we're not going to have the vaccine that's going to be able to be distributed to 360 million Americans or 6 million people from Massachusetts. So we're asking people to have the conversation with us right now. And that's when I talked about politics, whether it was with the teachers union or with other elected officials, let's have the conversation at the table, and let's have the conversations about what we're doing. That's the goal. Now, again, as we decide whether or not to have in-person learning or not, you talked about the parents that have the ability to be able to hire tutors and educate their kids at home. Whether their kids are learning at home or in school, they have that ability. What I want to make sure is that the lower income families, the kids that are affected by the achievement gap, English language learners, the best example or the best way for those kids to get education is in the classroom. Now, if we can't do it in the classroom, obviously we're going to do a remote. And the classroom is a remote hybrid. We will do that. Those same families that have privilege can still bring more tutors and more ability into their homes that underserved and underprivileged kids have.
Yeah, but what I was trying to suggest, Mr. Mayor, but a poorer parent doesn't have the option of keeping their kid at home even if they feel their kid is unsafe, because they may have to go to work. They may not have childcare. They may not be able to purchase whatever else it needs to keep their kids safe at home.
If we start all remote, they're in the same boat. They still have the same situation. Yep. They still have the same in front of them, the same challenge.
Have you considered testing for these kids at all, Mr. Mayor?
No, we've had some conversations about it. It's something that we don't need to do right now. And our public health commissioner has said that. Our infection rate across the city of Boston is 2.6% as of today. It's not like situations where we're bringing kids from that are coming from other states coming back to college. That's a different situation.
Superintendent, would you be comfortable under the situation you and the mayor have laid out? Would you be comfortable sending your own kids into class in the classroom in late September?
Yes, and I'll actually be going and visiting classrooms myself, with special PPE that I'll need because I'm going from one to another. So I think that, it is absolutely important to get the teachers in, to give them time to plan, to give them time to see the facilities, and then to lift up if there is something that they're concerned so that we can correct it.
Mr. Mayor, can we for a second go from K to 12 to higher ed, and then we'll get back to the superintendent? A lot of people, I think you included, have expressed concern about thousands of kids from all over the country, including some hotspots, returning to campus, some for online classes. Have you expressed that concern to the presidents of any of the colleges in Boston?
We're on constant conversations with the colleges. We've asked them. They've all submitted their plans to us as far as their testing plans, their isolation plans, their contract tracing plans, their plans as far as moving in student weekend. We're staying in very close contact with them. BU has put it very public. They have a database or a dashboard, if you will, on the amount of tests that are taken and people who test positive. So we're working with them very closely to make sure that they meet the requirements we're asking them to do to keep the COVID numbers down here in Boston. One of the concerns, and what we're trying to work through right now, is off-campus students. How do they patrol the off-campus students by making sure that the same kind of regulations for on-campus students are in place for off-campus students? So we're working with that. And a lot of these colleges, they're not bringing back all of their students. So we generally have about 150,000 students come into the city of Boston every school year. And a lot of them are just bringing back either the freshmen or the seniors or a combination of both. So we're gonna watch that situation pretty closely.
So you're comfortable with these kids coming back into town? You wouldn't prefer that they not?
I don't think I'm comfortable with anything, to be honest with you. I think my comfort level would be if we could all just stay home and physical distance and social isolate probably for another 4 or 5 months across the board to basically eliminate COVID. That's the best scenario. But unfortunately, we can't do that. We have to reopen society. Our restaurants are opening slowly. Our workplaces are opening slowly. The best case is, again, I just want to remind people that wearing masks, washing hands, physical social distancing, you need to continue to do that, because right now in Boston, the people of Boston and Massachusetts have done a very good job of keeping the numbers of the virus down. But if we start to let our guard down, we're going to see these numbers spike. And when they spike, we won't have any in-school learning. We won't have any in-college learning. We'll be shutting restaurants down.
Superintendent, we only have a minute or so left. When will things be locked into place? I know you both said that you're obviously monitoring the public health situation on a constant basis. When will parents, when will families, when will educators know this is the plan for September 21st?
Well, the mayor and I have been meeting quite a bit the last several weeks and really months to monitor the situation, to make sure we're thorough, to make sure that our facilities will be ready. And, as you know, this virus is always emerging and evolving, and guidance is always emerging and evolving. So I don't think that there's ever going to be full certainty, but we are trying to make some decisions very soon, and for the parents, so they can make immediate plans around their childcare and their family needs, and let us know what their family needs are. We'll be putting a survey out this week for them. But I do think, even if we were to open or go full remote, there's no telling that this could change in another month or two. So we have to be flexible and nimble, and I think that's why the state said to us that we need 3 plans. We need a plan for all in person, we need a plan for all remote, and we need a hybrid plan. And that then gives us the opportunity to really shift as we need to shift and be nimble.
And very soon means what for an anxious parent? End of this month?
No, not the end of the month. We are really hoping to be able to make that decision. I think, within the next week, we'll hopefully have a decision here. I'm looking at the mayor too, because he and I are both really collaborating on this decision, because of course it doesn't just impact the schools, right? It impacts families, communities, and our whole city. And in this case, I think that that's something that the mayor and I need to really deliberate on and make together. So
this is something that nobody has ever dealt
Quickly,
with.
if you can.
This is something no one's dealt with before, and it's a really complicated what we do. As you said, shutting down the marathon and closing schools was a lot easier decision than opening them because we still live with COVID. So the decisions that the superintendent that we make will be the right decisions for the kids.
Mr. Mayor, Superintendent Cassellius, thanks so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thanks, Jim.
Thank you.
The mayor and superintendent will also be with us on Boston Public Radio this Friday, where parents and others will have the opportunity to call and ask questions themselves. Again, that's this Friday on 89.7 WGBH. Next up, actress Lori Loughlin and her husband, fashion designer Massimo Giannulli, I think I got that right, are scheduled to be sentenced in a Boston courtroom this Friday for bribing their daughter's way into college. Yesterday, prosecutors asked the judge to put Loughlin behind bars for 2 months and Giannulli 5 months after they both pled guilty to paying $500,000 in bribes to have their two daughters recruited to the USC crew team when neither actually rode. The pair is among 33 parents and around 20 college coaches and other high ed officials who've been charged in the massive conspiracy involving some of the country's most prestigious schools and more than $25 million in bribes. The ringleader behind it all, a man named Rick Singer, who ran a college counseling company that helped these families find a so-called side door into schools like Yale or USC and funneled his fees through a fake nonprofit. In the new book, Unacceptable, Privilege, Deceit, and the Making of the College Admissions Scandal, a pair of Wall Street Journal reporters trace his path from small-timer to the biggest college admissions fraudster in U.S. history, and all the parents and coaches who chose to play and kids who got caught up in this along the way. Jennifer Levitz and Melissa Korn, congratulations, and so glad to have you here. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you. Great to
Jennifer, can I start with you and the guy without whom none of this would have been possible, the ringleader, Rick Singer? Give us a little bio of this guy and how he got from where he started to a courtroom in South Boston.
Rick Singer grew up outside Chicago. He was just in a sort of lower middle class family in an affluent area. He, from the very get-go, the thing that defined him was he was just so competitive. Anyone you talk to just says, this is the most competitive guy I've ever met. If he played basketball, he would throw elbows. If he played baseball, you know, he would say he got a home run when he only got a double. This just continues on and on. He goes off to college. He doesn't have a smooth path. It takes him about 6 years to graduates from a college in Texas. He then becomes a college coach. And he's a well-liked guy. He's charismatic. He's an athlete. He's, has a real rapport with kids. Some people would say he's like a Pied Piper with kids, but somewhere along the line in college coaching, he realizes that there's a system he can exploit in athletics.
My favorite story of all of them along the way, Jennifer, is when he's coaching the mid-schoolers at a Jewish community center, wasn't it, in Nebraska? Where he's basically doing, I think one of you wrote, well, you both wrote, that he was essentially playing the Bobby Knight of Nebraska. I thought it was great. So, Melissa, what was the skill that Singer had that was able to convince people who were rich and in some cases famous to do something that violated the law?
Yeah, Singer had this charisma about him. He was quite charming, I should say. And he really understood what some of the fears and anxieties of these parents would be. And he was able to really pick at them. And the parents, were willing participants in this. They acknowledged, those who have pleaded guilty have acknowledged, yes, it was my own ego that got me involved. But he was really able to say, listen, your kid only has a mediocre shot at getting into that dream school, but I have a solution for you. You could do this your own way.
But it wasn't just ego. I mean, from reading this book, there is this colossal sense of entitlement. That was the common thread through virtually all of these parents, was it not?
There certainly was. There certainly was the sense of entitlement that parents felt that their kids deserved this, or it was expected that they would get admission to these schools. They had gotten everything they ever wanted to this point, so why would this be any different?
Jennifer, the most painful moment, I think, in the whole book is, I hope I pronounce his name right, Matteo Sloan, Can you tell the story of this young man and his relationship with his father?
Yes, Mateo Sloan lives in LA, with a very wealthy family, attended a prestigious private school where he talked about how he worked so hard in high school. He knew what was expected of him, loaded up the AP classes, stayed up till 2 a.m. As he says, it was just a grind. And then he manages to get into USC. And sophomore year, he finds out on March 12th, 2019, that he's in USC because his father has paid more than $200,000, through Rick Singer to present him as a water polo player.
And what does he say to his father when his father comes home from arraignment and he's found out what his father had done?
He's standing in the kitchen, and the first thing he says to his father is, "Why didn't you believe in me?"
Yeah, that is so heartbreaking. It is just and just to go back, Melissa, for 1 second, the thing that is almost comical, were it not so painful, is the father having the kid pose in the damn pool in water polo gear, a sport which the kid did not play. That's right?
Correct. A lot of these students didn't actually play the sports that they were being put up as recruits for. And some of the time the kid posed for some pictures. Some of the time there was a photoshopped picture, put their face on someone else who had succeeded in it.
I'm embarrassed to admit, I think, to both of you, that at moments in this book, I actually felt bad for a fleeting second for a parent or two. I can't remember. I always confuse Huffman and Laughlin. I'm one of them who cheated and then decided not to cheat, or whatever it was. And for a fleeting second, but then I say to myself, well, first, did either of you have ever had that experience in the research and writing of this book, starting with you, Jennifer?
Yes, sure. There were a few parents that had some real anxieties that you could relate to. There was, you mentioned Felicity Huffman. She had a daughter with learning challenges, and she was so worried about her testing. There was another dad in there that really struck me because he was trying everything. His daughter had a lot of problems, had to go to like a boarding school for troubled teens, and he was terrified, she'd get out of that and not have a structured environment. So they had some real concerns that I think a lot of parents can relate to, but you do have to keep reminding yourself that people go through this all over the place.
Exactly. We all do.
Right.
And most of us aren't spending $200,000 to get our kid into USC. About a month and a half or 2 months after this all broke in March, Andrew Lelling, the U.S. attorney who was lead prosecutor, was on this show with me. And I posed the question to him. I'd like you to listen to that exchange and get your feedback on this. Here's Andrew Lelling. What's the difference between a couple of parents paying tens of thousands of dollars to a coach or that ringleader of this whole an operation like this, and say Charles Kushner donating $2.5 million to Harvard just weeks before his son Jared got in?
The difference is fraud. So, as has been true for time immemorial, if you donate $10 million to a school, that school's more likely to take your kid. There's no fraud. Here you have people making things up. So you have fake SAT scores, or you have students creating fake profile, or parents creating fake profiles for their kids, implying or showing that the kid is an athlete when the kid is not an athlete.
Melissa, I hate to put you in the position of editorialist, but my attitude is, you donate $2.5 million. Your son's Jared Kushner, who his high school guidance counselor told him, don't bother applying to Harvard, you're not qualified. You're committing fraud too. You're saying he's eligible because I gave you $2.5 million. Do you think Lelling is, technically he's right about the law, but does that rub you the wrong way too, or no?
I don't know if it rubs me the wrong way. I do think it makes a lot of people uncomfortable, this idea of what Singer called the back door, right? You just make large donations to the school and you get special treatment. It is completely legal, but it is an uncomfortable fact of college admissions. And I think that was the defense of a lot of these parents, was we just thought we were doing a variation on that. But as Lelling said, once you start introducing the fake athletic profiles, that's a tougher defense for sure.
So, Jennifer, quickly, side door illegal, back door not illegal. That's okay?
I think that the back door is pretty icky. I mean, I think that it doesn't feel fair to most people. We have a whole chapter in the book called Gray Area, sort of possibly gross but legal, and that's one of the things in.
Before you guys go, is anything going to really change? I know there's a lot of good rhetoric based upon Andrew Lelling's work and your work, starting with you, Jennifer. Is the world going to change, or are this just going to continue until it's found out yet again? Starting with you, Jennifer.
I think there's probably some people nervous about this. I certainly think that some of these schools, the watchdogs, could do a better job of making sure this doesn't happen. I don't know if people ever stop trying to chase status.
Melissa, how about you?
Yeah, I tend to be pretty cynical about this. And as we talk about in the book, the kind of main body of college admissions officers and guidance counselors says this isn't an admissions scandal. And I think that's a little tough for me to swallow, that there will be real change when people in admissions aren't still quite acknowledging that there are weaknesses and holes in the system that allowed this to happen. And I think until they admit that there's a problem, it's tough to see real reform.
Well, if you don't think there's a problem, all you have to do is read your book. Jennifer Levitz, Melissa Korn, thanks and congratulations on your work. I appreciate it. The book again, Unacceptable: Privilege, Deceit, and the Making of the College Admissions Scandal. We also have an update on a story we talked about at length yesterday. The Postmaster General announced today that all of his planned changes for the U.S. Postal Service are on hold until after the election to avoid what he calls any appearance of impropriety. Of course, that announcement comes after at least 20 attorneys general, including Mass AG Maura Healey, said they'd be suing over his changes, and after we learned he's testifying before a Senate committee later this week. So you'll forgive me if I'm a tad skeptical. And by the way, you can catch AG Healey on Boston Public Radio tomorrow if you want to hear more of her thoughts on this situation. That's it for tonight. Please come back tomorrow. Former Governor Deval Patrick will join me to talk about the state of the Democratic Party, their ongoing virtual convention, and issues of race in this country and in this year's election. Plus, political consultant Wilnelia Rivera, who ran Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley's campaign, on why she believes the pandemic is an opportunity to fix some of the many inequities that infect the United States. That and more tomorrow at 7. Thanks for watching, and of course, stay safe.
Anderton is the finest seaside resort on the whole coast.
I should very much like to see it, sir. It's time.